Hello class. Here is a video lecture on, taking us up to Canto 25 for class on Wednesday. Let's see, it's going to be the Wednesday, March 31st. All right. So, things I'm going to talk about today. One, a little bit about Geryon at the end of 16 and the beginning of Canto 17. Then I'm going to talk about the Simonists in Canto 19. And then, third, I'm going to talk about Dante and Virgil's encounter with the winged demons in the little pouch of the barrators. All right, these are the guys who are plunged in tar in Cantos 21, 22. So those are the main things I'm going to talk about, and let's get started. So, real quick, the end of 16. I think this is where I left off last class. Right at the bottom of page 128, Dante describes with a majestic simile the appearance of the monster Geryon swimming up through the air, with his face like a man and his back like a serpent and all of that. Let's listen to the simile for a moment. 124. Faced with that truth which seems a lie, a man should always close his lips as long as he can. To tell it shames him, even though he's blameless. But here I can't be still, and by the lines of this my comedy, reader, I swear, and may my verse find favor for long years, that through the dense and darkened air I saw a figure swimming, rising up, enough to bring amazement to the firmest heart, like one returning from the waves where he went down to loose an anchor, snagged upon a reef, or something else hid in the sea, who stretches upward and draws in his feet. Remarkable. So he says, first of all, he's faced with a truth that seems a lie. So there's a bunch of doubling play in these images, because on the one hand, this thing is there, it's true, but it's so unbelievable that it seems like it's a lie. So that's the more obvious meaning. On the other hand, this true thing that he sees is also an image of fraud, which is a kind of lie. So it both seems a lie and is a lie in another sense. This is the first place that he calls, line 128, calls the poem his comedy, or commedia in Italian. It's interesting, he doesn't actually call it the Divine Comedy in this poem. He just calls it my commedia. Divine was added later by editors, so that's interesting. This is just the comedy for him. All right, and then he says, then at the end, the simile is comparing Geryon to a swimmer who has gone down under the waves to loosen a snagged anchor, snagged upon a reef or something else hid in the sea. So that's the most enigmatic part of this image. In what sense is Geryon like a swimmer having loosened an anchor, or at least gone down to loosen anchor? At the very least, it's suggested the anchor here, well, on the one hand, the anchor of the fraudulent, right, is snagged on something down underneath. On the other hand, maybe Geryon is going to help, but by giving Dante a ride down, so he can see the sins of the fraudulent and have that revealed to him. Maybe he will pull out the anchor that could snag Dante. I don't know. Something like that. Then the description of his appearance on the next page, on the beginning of 17. That filthy effigy of fraud. Line 7. Okay. And then they ride him down. He's both bestial, animal, and human. Or so both reptilian, mammalian, and human. This kind of grotesque transmogrification. All right. Well, so I'm going to skip forward to 19. I'm going to be speedy about this if I can. Just notice in 18 that this is the first pouch of the Malebranche. That's the 10 evil pouches, right? That's what Malebranche means. The first of them you have, right to the second of them in Canto 18, you have flatterers, and they're plunged in excrement. So let's just say brown nosing is an old notion, very old. Okay, so 19. So this is the third pouch now, 8th circle, third pouch, the home of the Simonists, who, as the beginning of the canto indicates, are attached to Simon Magus, or Magus, from the book of Acts, who wants to buy some of the apostles' wonder-working powers, their miracle-working powers, and of course can't. So Simon Magus has always been associated with the desire to purchase spiritual power with money, right, or to control spiritual power with material means, which in the Middle Ages, as you may remember from Western heritage, came to be especially associated with the purchase of, spiritual leadership positions like bishoprics and leadership roles in the church, up for hire and purchase, which needed to be reformed. The investiture controversy and all of that. All right, so we find them, first page of 19, page 137. O Simon Magus, O his sad disciples, rapacious ones who take the things of God that ought to be the brides of righteousness and make them fornicate for gold and silver. Going to be this image of the bride, the church, being, whored out by her leaders, by like the bishops and people like this. This is going to be an image throughout that goes throughout this canto. Interesting the way Dante prays here. Dante, the character, or actually, I guess it's really Dante, the poet, at line 10. O highest wisdom, how much art you show in heaven and earth, in this sad world below, how just your power is when it allots. It's just, he hasn't really been praying like that, Dante, before this, so we keep our eye on that. Along the sides, line 13, and down along the bottom, I saw that livid rock was perforated. The openings were all one width and round. And if you look a couple pages later, there's a nice image of this with all the holes and the people crammed in there from Botticelli. So back on the first page, 16, they did not seem to me less round, broad, or more than that in my handsome San Giovanni, were made to serve as basins for baptism. Interesting, they're these holes that these Simonists are crammed into compared to baptismal fonts. So there's a dark irony there, or maybe a travesty even of baptism. Well, it's more than baptism though, because as we see at the bottom of the page, we got legs sticking out up to the thigh. The rest remained within. Line 25. Both souls of every sinner were on fire. Their joints were writhing with such violence they would have severed withes and ropes of grass. So, travesty of baptism, also of Pentecost, right? Where you have in the book of Acts, right at the beginning, fire on the heads of the apostles, as the Holy Spirit descends upon them. And this is relevant here because the Simonists, the Simoniacal, popes and bishops and things, are descendants of the apostles according to the Catholic understanding. And so, but here they are, like they're upside down with their feet on fire, both suffering but also kind of showing that they've actually dishonored their divine calling and are actually being tortured by it now. Dishonored their divine calling, turned it upside down. So it's a kind of travesty of Pentecost. They've ruined their charge, their divine charge. All right, so they pull up next to one of these holes. Virgil says, and Dante's interested in talking to them. Who is this shade 31 who suffers and quivers more than everybody else? Okay. They go up next to him. 37. What pleases you will please me too. You are my Lord. You know I do not swerve from what you will. You know what is unspoken. At this we came to the fourth embankment. Embankment descended. Okay, my good Lord did not leave me. All right. Until he brought me to the hole that held that sinner who lamented with his legs. You gotta love the way Dante talks. Okay. Whoever you may be, dejected soul, whose head is downward, planted like a pole, my words began. Notice that Dante is talking himself here. He's becoming more confident talking for himself. It's part of one of the little indications of his growth in this in Inferno. So planted like a pole, whoever you are whose head is downward, planted like a pole, do speak if you are able. I stood, as does the friar who confesses the foul assassin, who, fixed fast, head down, calls back the friar, and so delays his death. So ironically, Dante's in the confessor position. The priest, who's actually a pope, as we'll see, is confessing. And the pope is upside down. And which is actually an ironic echo of the upside down martyrdom of Peter, who by tradition was crucified upside down, an upside down cross, and again by according to the Catholic understanding is the first pope. So you've got a kind of travesty of the papacy here as well. All right, so Dante's hearing his confession, kind of, and he cried out. This guy who's down there, are you already standing there, O Boniface? The book has lied to me by several years. Are you so quickly sated with the riches for which you did not fear to take by guile the lovely lady, then to violate her? Okay, so this guy who's speaking now thinks that Dante is the next pope, who is also coming to be crammed down in. So that tells us. And he addresses this next following pope as Boniface. So this is all things you have to know dates for. Just a minute. Sorry about that. My wife just called. All right. So what was I saying? I was saying we've got a pope speaking here, and he thinks he's speaking to the next pope coming. Well, the pope who is speaking, we come to find, is Nicholas III, and his dates as the leader of the Catholic Church were 1277 to 1280. So just 3 or 4 years there, 20 years before the action of the Divine Comedy. Nicholas III, who is a Simonist, so he's down here talking. He himself is prophesying the arrival of a following pope, Boniface VIII, who ruled from 1295 to 1303. So he's the ruling pope at the time of the action. Dead by the time Dante's writing this, and Dante, is sending him to hell. So this takes a lot of moxie. And then, finally, on the next page, Clement V, another pope from 1305 to 1314, will also be prophesied as coming to hell. And this is the real moxie move from Dante, because that guy was still alive, it seems, at the time of the writing of Inferno. So Dante, one of the things you have to know about Dante is he has no problem throwing shade on ecclesial figures that he thinks are problematic. So yes, Dante Catholic, but that doesn't mean sort of that he doesn't have opinions about things, right? Anyhow, so what is Nicholas saying to his imagined, follower coming after him? He says, "Are you already here, Boniface? I thought it was going to be a few more years. Are you so quickly sated with the riches for which you did not fear to take by guile the lovely lady, the church, then to violate her?" So this is Nicholas III accusing Boniface VIII, the subsequent pope, of simony himself, right? Selling the lovely lady, the church, for money and violating her. The irony here, of course, is he's accusing him of the very sin for which he himself is being punished. So there's like a ridiculous hypocrisy there. But mark of the sinners in Dante's underworld is that they don't think they're guilty, right? They're still caught up in that psychology of sin that is not just self-congratulating, but it's that doesn't really have any doubt about its rightness. All right. "And I became," line 58, "like one of those who stand as if they have been mocked, who cannot understand what has been said to them and can't respond." Dante's just upset. But Virgil said, "Tell this to him at once. I am not he, not whom you think I am." And I replied as I was told to do so. And thus, or at this, the spirit twisted both his feet. I'm at the top of 139 now. And sighing and with a despairing voice, "What is it that you want from me?" And he tells a little bit more about himself. Let's skip down. It says to 73, "Below my head there is somebody else who's here for simony before me." And they get stuffed further down. When the next guy comes, they stuff him down. So like Boniface is going to come and then stuff Nicholas down further and blah, blah, blah. Keep on going. 76. "I too shall yield my place and fall below when he arrives, the one for whom I had mistaken you when I was quick to question. But I have baked my feet a longer time, have stood like this upon my head, than he is to stand planted there, here with scarlet feet. For after him one uglier in deeds will come." This is Clement V, the Pope at the writing at the time of the writing of the Inferno. "A lawless shepherd from the west, worthy to cover him and cover me. He'll be a second Jason, of whom we read in Maccabees. And just as Jason's king was soft on him," this is a person who this is a man who persecuted the Jews in the books of the Maccabees. "So shall the king of France be soft to this one. And I do not know if I was too rash here," Dante says. "I answered so. Then tell me now, how much gold did our Lord ask that St. Peter give to him before he placed the keys within his care? Surely the only thing he said was, 'Follow me.' And Peter and the others never asked for gold or silver when they chose Matthias to take the place of the transgressing soul. Stay as you are, for you are rightly punished, and guard with care the money got by evil that made you so audacious against Charles." Well, I'm not going to talk about that Charles bit, but the beginning of Dante's response there, one, interesting because he's angry, righteous indignation. Doesn't feel sorry for this guy at all. That shows one that first that Dante's, this is not necessarily a particularly weak spot for him morally. Rather, he has an appropriate indignation for this sin. It's something that he already detested in life. But it's an appropriate response. We see at line 121 on the next page that it pleased my guide that Dante is angry at this sin. He listened always with such satisfied expression to the sound of those true words. Virgil encourages Dante's anger towards, like, righteous indignation toward the sin, because anger at a properly unjust object or event, occurrence, is actually a just moral emotion. So that's the way Dante is supposed to feel. A big part of what's happening in hell for Dante is the education of his emotions, right? Moving away from pity that he shouldn't be feeling because it implies that God's punishment of sinners is unjust, to a lack of sympathetic attachment, and a more appropriate anger at the sin. Okay, so what is he saying down there at 90 now? He says, I don't remember our Lord selling St. Peter the keys. This is the passage from the Gospel where where Jesus hands to Peter symbolically the keys of the kingdom and the power of binding and loosing. Now, there are different ways to understand these passages. They're pretty enigmatic. The traditional Catholic understanding is that it's the passing on of episcopal or bishop's authority to Peter and the other apostles, and Peter as the leader of the apostles, again on the Catholic understanding. Okay, so Peter didn't buy those from Jesus, Dante is saying. And whenever Peter and the others chose the replacement apostle, Matthias, in the book of Acts after Judas dies, they didn't take gold from him, right? Like, this is all freely given. All right. So it's against simony. Look at page 140. This is where it gets a little bit more interesting. Top of the page. And were it not that I am still prevented by reverence for those exalted keys, which represent the authority of the papacy, were it not for my reverence for them, that you had held within the happy life, I'd utter words much heavier than these, because your avarice afflicts the world. It tramples on the good, lifts up the wicked. So Dante's in this interesting place. Reverence for papal power, but excoriation and contempt for sin as it appears there, especially the sin of simony. You shepherds, the evangelist had noticed when he saw her who sits upon the waters, and realized she fornicates with kings, she who was born with 7 heads and the power, and had the power and support of the 10 horns, as long as virtue was her husband's pleasure. He's talking about the Whore of Babylon there, a kind of startling image that appears in the book of Revelation, seen by John the Evangelist, right? And the Whore of Babylon there is an image of the corrupting power of worldly, the kind of corrupted worldly political society, and which Dante is suggesting here not only fornicates with kings, but also with church leaders when they get mixed up in political power and material gain and all of this. So Dante here, and this is a point he's going to develop later, is really, really against the combining of spiritual and temporal power. All right. He thinks this is poisonous in the church, and a big cause and need for reform. This is just a bit further going on at 112. You've made yourselves a god of gold and silver. How are you different from idolaters, save that they worship one and you 100 pieces of gold? Ah, Constantine, what wickedness was born, and not from your conversion, from the dower that you bestowed upon the first rich father. This is the so-called donation of Constantine, which has been historically questioned whether it actually happened, but symbolically we can understand. The idea, the story that was told, is that Constantine gave a large tract of land to the Bishop of Rome, the Pope, on his conversion, and this became, the beginning of the papal states. The Pope having his own territory and his own terrain of political rule, and thus mixing spiritual and temporal power, and really, tainting the purity of focus that he needed, centuries ago before Dante, tainting that, and leading to all kinds of other violations that he associates with simony. Okay, so that's all a problem for Dante, as we have seen. And At the end of Dante's speech, Virgil is happy with him. Good, that's my boy. All right, good. I want to skip forward now. Okay, we move past Canto 20, 8th circle, 4th pouch, diviners, magicians, that kind. Some interesting stuff there, but I want to move to 21. 8th circle, 5th pouch, baritors. And here we have demons, these demons, these winged demons who, are called the Malebranche, or evil claws. I'm looking at the head note on page 145. And they're kind of guarding these guys who are, these baritors who are floating in the pitch down below. All right, I want to take it up on page 146. Dante and Virgil are watching the spectacle of these sinners in the pitch, and they're the Malebranche who are watching them. They're watching the spectacle of all of this from behind cover. And let's see. Virgil says to Dante, line 58, page 146, "Don't let those demons see that you are here. Take care to crouch behind the cover of a crag. No matter what offense they offer me, don't be afraid. I know how these things go. I've had to face such fracases before." All right, so Virgil is very assured here and thinks that everything's going to go just fine. So that's noteworthy. Virgil steps out. Dante's hiding. What does Virgil say? He moves out to the bridgehead, and they all turn to face him. The demons rush against my guide with all their prongs, 71, but he called out, "Can't you forget your savagery? Before you try to maul me, just let one of your troop step forward. Hear me out, and then decide if I am to be hooked." Okay, so Virgil taking a very kind of like he's taking a very rhetorical, persuasive tone here. Going to talk sense to these demons. At this, they howled, "Let Malakota go." Malakota meaning evil tail. Come back to that in a minute. And so he's the leader of them. He comes up, and one of them moved up. The others stayed. As he came, he asked, "How can he win?" "O Malakota," said Virgil, "do you think I've come?" My master answered him, "Already armed, as you can see, against your obstacles, without the will of God and helpful fate." Interesting that he combines God and fate there, but let us move on. It is the will of heaven for me to show this wild way to another. Okay, so he appeals to authority, says this is what God wants. At this, the pride of Malakota fell. His prong dropped to his feet. He told his fellows, "Since that's the way things stand, let us not wound him." My guide then spoke to me. "O you who crouch, bent low among the bridge's splintered rocks, you can feel safe, and now return to me." And Dante comes out. Now look, my argument about this scene is that Virgil is displaying his own naivete. He thinks he can talk sense to demons who are fundamentally liars, right? Because they're actually not going to leave Dante and Virgil alone, like they say. They're also not susceptible of rational discourse, really. And Virgil thinks that they are. So, two interesting things about this. One, we're going to see in this scene the boundaries, the circumscribing of Virgil's mind and his capacity to understand the things that he's seeing. He misplays this situation and is overconfident, naive, doesn't quite understand the way these demons are. Dante, the second point, and so Virgil, we're seeing Virgil's limits. We're going to keep that in mind. Dante, on the other hand, at the bottom of the page now, 147, is more sensitive to their evil and untrustworthiness than Virgil is. So that's interesting. Dante is actually seeing more, or kind of more sensitive to the reality at hand than Virgil is. Look at this, 191, Dante comes out, the devils edge forward, and I feared that they might fail to keep their word. Dante looks at him and is like, those guys aren't trustworthy, right? I don't think they're going to keep their word. Dante's right. Dante's fear, his moral emotion, which is what fear is, it's a kind of moral emotion. Dante's fear is well placed. You should have fear when there's something actually scary, right? If there's a bear in your campground, you don't have fear, it's actually irrational. That emotion is ordered to the truth, to reality. Okay, so Dante feels the right thing. Just so I saw the infantry when they marched out. Blah, blah, blah. Okay, Dante, next page, huddling close to Virgil. They're all kind of leering at him. All right. Interesting stuff about dates. In the middle of the page, we find out, if you do the math, you can actually figure out exactly when this is. That this is in the year 1300, Holy Saturday. Okay, that is the Saturday after Good Friday, which Jesus died on the cross. There's a whole bunch of symbolism about dating here, but I'm not going to go into it. Look what Dante says at the bottom of 148. 120, line 127, he says to Virgil, "Ah me, what is this, master, that I see? Can't we do without this company?" Because the demons are walking along with them. If you know how to go, I want no escort. If you are just as keen as usual, can't we see how these demons grind their teeth? Their brows are menacing. They promise trouble. So again, Dante has the right inclination. His emotions are telling him the truth. But Virgil, still trying to gentle Dante, says, top of the next page, "I do not want you frightened. Just let them gnash away as they may wish. They do it for the wretches boiled in pitch. They're just thinking about their guys down there in the pitch, not us." That's not true. How do we know? Well, keep going. They turned around along the left-hand bank, but first each pressed his tongue between his teeth as a signal for their leader, Barbaricia, and he had made a trumpet of his ass. Okay, something that never happened in Homer and Virgil, never would have happened in Homer and Virgil, is too low and base. Someone making an ass bugle. This is, in case you're wondering, this is a good translation of the Italian word, which is also a crude word for the same thing. And so this is a low kind of base, disgusting image that Dante makes. But you know what? He uses a disgusting image for a disgusting thing. What is happening here? Like, do you trust these guys if they're wandering along with you? They're going along with you, and you're like, you can trust us. I'm not sure this is a good sign. Not only that these these demons are not serious, but there's a kind of travesty here of music, of military music. This is just a sort of darkly absurd scene, again undercutting Virgil's apparent sensibility. Beginning of Canto 22 now, we have an entire epic simile, not kidding, from line 1 to 12 about the ass bugle. You just have to take that in, because you're never going to see that again. Only in Dante, only in hell too. Like, you don't see this kind of stuff outside of hell. All right, good. Let's move on to 23 for the end of this bizarre scene. Dante and Virgil just barely get away on the first page of Canto 23. This is page 155. Some interesting stuff happening with the sinners down in the pitch. I'm going to skip over it, but it's all interesting and could be interpreted if we had world enough and time. Look at line 19. Dante, watching what's happening with these sinners in the pitch that the demons are engaged with, says, line 19, I could already feel my hair curl up from fear and looked back attentively while saying, Master, if you don't conceal yourself and me at once, they terrify me, these Malebranche. They are after us. I so imagine them. I hear them now. And he to me, were I a leaded mirror, I could not gather in your outer image more quickly than I have received your inner. For even now your thoughts have joined my own. In both our acts and aspects we are kin. With both our minds I've come to one decision. Which is an interesting way of speaking. I think Virgil is just saying, I completely understand you. Long way of saying that. And so, what does he do? He grabs a hold of Dante and then slides down off the ridge that they're walking along into the next pouch, dramatically. Line 37, my guide snatched me up instantly, just as the mother who is wakened by a roar and catches sight of blazing flames beside her will lift up her son and run without a stop. She cares more for the child than for herself, not pausing even to throw on a shift. So he slid down on his back and saves Dante. Virgil in a maternal position there, right? It's kind of sweet, but it's also an image of the way that Virgil is in a way kind of parenting Dante here. Like he's Dante's schoolmaster, but also his guide, bringing him through this in a sort of parental way. Okay, so now we're in the next circle where you've got hypocrites, and they're all wearing these cloaks, line 64, that are gilded on the outside, but on the inside they're lead, right? So there's that inner-outer dynamic with hypocrisy, which is, symbolized by the contrappasso here. Okay, Dante's talking to some of them who are friars, right? Again, Dante not afraid to put church figures down in hell. What I want to get to is line 109 on page 158. Dante says to the friars who have been talking to him a little bit about hypocrisy and all this, Dante says, I then began, O friars, your misdeeds, but said no more, because my eyes had caught one crucified by 3 stakes on the ground. So you get these guys walking with weighted cloaks, but then there are also people on the ground who are crucified, right? Crucified by 3 stakes on the ground. When he saw me, that sinner writhed all over, and he breathed hard into his beard with sighs. Observing that, Fra Catalano, this is one of the friars walking around, said, to me, that one impaled there whom you see counseled the Pharisees that it was prudent to let one man and not one nation suffer. So this is Caiaphas, the high priest at the time of Jesus' condemnation and crucifixion. Naked, he has been stretched across the path, as you can see, and he must feel the weight of anyone who passes over him. So these guys with the heavy weights, heavy cloaks, have to step on these people, part of their contrappasso, I guess. Like torment in this ditch afflicts both his father-in-law and others in that council, which for the Jews has seeded so much evil. So it's interesting that Caiaphas and company are down here in the terrain of the hypocrites. What is hypocritical about them exactly? We can understand the contrappasso of the crucifixion. They crucified Christ, so they too are crucified. Okay. In what sense are they hypocrites? Well, this is something that is disputed in the tradition of Dante interpretation, as are many matters. You should keep that in mind as we're going through. A lot of my interpretations are my best shot, and they might be a majority opinion, but oftentimes disputed. Well, one interpretation is this, that Caiaphas, in recommending that Jesus be killed, gives a presumptively public-spirited reason, right? Better to kill one man than all of us get killed by Pilate and Rome when he leads an insurrection, because they thought Jesus was going to be a political messiah, a political king to rise up, and the Jews say, Caiaphas reasons better for him to die than for all of us to suffer when he declares himself king, right? Political insurrection. So one one explanation for the way in which Caiaphas could be understood as a hypocrite is to say that account that Caiaphas gives, that reasoning he gives, is actually masking his own unjust reasons for killing Jesus, right? Why does he want to kill Jesus really? Well, perhaps because he's jealous of his power and authority. But he gives a public-spirited reason for it, masking the real reason. Okay, so something hypocritical about that. This is one kind of explanation. Okay, so like torment in this ditch afflicts both his father-in-law and others in that council, which for the Jews exceeded so much evil. So you got these hypocrites, Caiaphas and the others, in the ground. Now listen, this is the last interesting thing here on this page. Then I saw Virgil stand amazed above that one who lay stretched out upon a cross so squalidly in his eternal exile. Virgil is astounded at the spectacle of Caiaphas. Why? This is the only moment in the Inferno where Virgil actually, is astonished by anything. He seems to know about other things, to be comfortable with them, not to be in wonder at them. But he is in wonder at Caiaphas. Why is he astonished? Well, obviously, first of all, his emotional reaction reveals him. Okay. Just as it does with Dante. What could this say about him? Again, it's an interpretive matter, but one possibility that I would suggest is that he's amazed at Caiaphas for having the chance to see Jesus and not accept him. That Caiaphas looked Jesus in the face and said no. He was given the option, he was given the chance, didn't take it. Virgil is palpably aware that he didn't have this opportunity, right? He played that angle really forcefully back in Canto 4. And in Canto 1, he said, I was born in the season of the false and lying gods. I didn't have the opportunity. Can't believe that someone could be faced with that and not take it, not accept it. That's one potential reason for his amazement. All right. Another thing that somebody suggested to me one time is that Jesus is killed. Jesus is killed at the end of the gospel, by the Jews, by Caiaphas, to kind of handle the political situation and keep the peace. Well, that's actually, interestingly, parallel to Turnus getting killed at the end of the Aeneid for political peace. He's battling down the proud for the sake of the peace of all. So perhaps Virgil actually sees something of himself in Caiaphas, right? He's the one who promotes the killing of Turnus, and that sees in the spectacle of Caiaphas something like his own role, right? That Jesus is a new Turnus in a way, punished unjustly for the sins, punished unjustly for the sake of political peace. Maybe. That's another beguiling possibility. Last point, and then I'm going to turn this video off. Next page. Actually, let's take it up at 127, the bottom of page 158. Virgil says to one of the friars that they're talking to, he addressed the friar in this way: "If it does not displease you, if you may, tell us if there's some passage on the right over here that would allow the two of us to leave without our having to compel black angels to travel to this deep to get us out. I don't want to meet those guys again. Is there any other way out?" The friar answers, "Closer than you hope, you'll find a rocky bridge that stretches from the great round wall and crosses all the savage valleys, except that here it's broken, not a bridge. But where its ruins slope along the bank and heap up at the bottom, you can climb." So it tells him how to get out. My leader stood a while with his head bent, then said, "He who hooks sinners over there gave us a false account of this affair." The Malebranche gave Virgil bad directions for how to get out. At which the friar, In Bologna, I once heard that about the devil's many vices. They said he was a liar and a father of lies. And then my guide moved on with giant strides, somewhat disturbed, with anger in his eyes. At this, I left those overburdened spirits while following the prints of his dear feet. Okay, that's actually a really clutch scene. And this is my last point for the day. Important, why? Because the friar indicates Virgil's blind spot. He doesn't understand the absolute untrustworthiness of the demons down here. These and of the path of Satan, the father of lies. That's actually a revealed doctrine. The idea of an absolutely untrustworthy satanic position. Virgil's conception of evil is different than that, and an idea of a father of lies, of spiritual evil that is as is revealed in the Bible and the Christian tradition, is actually Dante has a better handle on that from his education, and these friars who are in hell after all also have a better sense of that than Virgil does. So we see some of Virgil's pagan limits, the limits of his understanding of the evil that they're encountering, simply because of the limits of rational comprehension without revealed truth. So that's really important. That's something that Dante is showing us by the way that this story is unfolding. Virgil's limits being shown, Dante's own intimations and sense of things more trustworthy. So we're going to keep an eye on that. I'll just preview of coming attractions. Dante's going to grow past Virgil eventually. That's what's going to happen here. Okay, and so we end on that note of thick irony from the friar. We will take this up on Friday from there.